In this video, I'm going to be comparing the Asics Novablast 3 with the Saucony Endorphin Speed 3 and the New Balance Rebel V3. Uppers, midsoles, outsoles, what it is like to run in these shoes. And if I could only buy one shoe, what shoe would I buy? The battle of the threes. To the death. As of the filming of this video, I have run 104 miles in the Asics Novablast 3. I have run 101 miles in the Endorphin Speed 3, and I have run 109 miles in the Rebel V3. So this video will also serve as my 100-mile review for each of these shoes. Actually, before we get too far, be sure to stick around to the end of the video because I'm going to reveal that one of these shoes I would not buy again. Whoa! Oh, and for disclosure, Saucony New Balance Asics, they did not send me any of these shoes for review. They do not care about me. I try not to take it personal. Okay, we're gonna start with the uppers. First, the Novablast 3. It is a step backwards from version 2, just slightly, which is kind of weird because they're both listed as jacquard mesh. That's a fun word to say. Jean-Luc Jacquard. It's kind of cheaper, or it's like scratchy. The second one was nice, velvety, soft. I could just sleep on it. This one, there's some scrunching up at the front also whenever you tighten it down. I will say on the positives for this shoe, it's puffy around the heel collar. It's, of the thrice, it is the most comfortable, but it's pretty much just an upper 2 out of 3. All right, now before we discuss the upper of the Rebel V3, I want to say it is important to know and understand the reviewer and the biases that that reviewer has. On uppers, I disregard aesthetics. I do not care about the colorway. Gold and white, black and gold, sure, I'll wear it if it feels good or I feel like it makes me go faster. So most uppers are just gonna be like a 2 out of 3 for me. To warrant a 1 out of 3, I would have to have issues with the lockdown, like maybe some heel slippage. There would have to be some sort of pain in my foot somewhere, or if the upper is just breaking apart from the inside and detaching from the midsole. Basically everything about the Nike Invincible 1 upper. For the Rebel V3 upper, this is a step in the right direction. We've got an engineered knit upper versus the synthetic mesh construction in version 2. In my version 2, it did rip apart from the heel here within 50 miles. New Balance has added structured mesh on version 3 with the new inner sleeve. I like it a lot, 2.5 out of 3. It is important to note with the upper for the Rebel V2, V3, this particular shoe, I have sized up to a 9.5. I am a size 9, US men's size 9. I always wear size 9. I order size 9 and I never size up, I never size down, except for select Adidas shoes, the racing shoes. I actually size down to an 8.5. And for these New Balance Rebel series, I have to go a little bit half size longer. So be aware it might be a little too tight if you do your regular size. And for the upper of the Saucony Endorphin Speed 3, if you have ever run in a Saucony, you know how world-class their uppers are. And that's mostly because they use a bunch of copywritten F words like flex film and form fit, which basically means they have cushioning that shapes to your feet and upper materials that flex and stretch and protect. Now, it somehow still feels like an 80th of a step back from the upper from the Saucony Endorphin Speed 1, but that's just probably nostalgia speaking. I think the number 1 is the GOAT. I would still give this upper a 3 out of 3. Saucony Endorphin Speed 3 wins the upper battle. In the words of Ed Bud, outsoles now. They all suck. They all suck. I mean, they all suck. So for the Saucony Endorphin Speed 3 and the Novablast 3, they both have received some gentle criticism for their lack of traction. And I will say, I never slipped in either one of these shoes, not once. However, whilst I was running, especially in slippery conditions, I had to be very mindful of where my foot was landing, especially at higher speeds. Let's just say there's a lot left to be desired for those two. And so the Rebel V3 wins the outsole battle with a standardish outsole, 2 out of 3, because there's plenty of coverage here. Enough to get the job done. Okay, now we're gonna get to the good stuff, the midsoles. These shoes have been out for a very long time. You probably likely already know the specs, the drop, what kind of foam is used. I'm less interested in that, and I am more interested in talking about what it feels like to run in these shoes. Okay, so the first midsole that I want to discuss is the Novablast 3. So the Novablast lineup has just evolved and continues to evolve ever since the first one. In a lot of ways, I feel like the Novablast 3 is the opposite of a Novablast 1. So in the Novablast 1, there was a 10mm drop versus an 8mm drop in number 2 and number 3. Also, there was not as much padding up underneath the forefoot, and they had this very narrow decoupled groove in the back. The result was that I felt like I was always leaning forward and I felt propelled forward, and there was a lot of ground contact feel up at the front. For the Novablast 2, Asics added some foam up at the front, so it had some bounce, and it changed the dynamic of the shoe to more of a comfortable cruiser. And I used this shoe on recovery days. It lost some of the excitement and I didn't feel that propulsion forward. Still love the shoe, but it changed. Okay, the midsole of the Novablast 3, follow me here. Okay, because it feels like, for me, that there's even more foam up at the front and therefore is more like a spike, like tilted back. I know that's not the case. There's 41mm back here, there's 33 up here for an 8mm drop. However, this is what it feels like. So in landing, the best way to land, I feel like you're most rewarded when you land on the forefoot. If you land on the forefoot, which I tend to do at higher speeds, that's when I get the most energy return. And so the bounce is back and the excitement is back like version 1. But version 1 was a 10mm drop with no foam up at the front, or very little, and more in the back. So it felt like this. This shoe feels like this. That's just how it feels. So if you are a forefoot striker, you will probably really enjoy the feel and the ride of the Novablast 3. All right, now let's flip to the opposite side of the spectrum. We're gonna be talking about the Saucony Endorphin Speed 3. The landing for this one is all ground contact feel. I know that there's foam up front, but when I step into this shoe, I feel like my foot is sinking almost into putty. If I was a giant and I stepped into a raft, that's what it's like. So I feel like the foam is around the outside, which is very strange in a feeling because when I land, I feel, okay, now follow me on this. When I said my foot sinks into it, I want you to know it's not Tempur-Pedic foam, it's not like a Hoka shoe or anything like that. But when it sinks in mostly up front. In the back, I do feel like there is support of foam underneath the heel. So the best landing for this particular shoe is on the heel, especially because of Saucony's speed roll technology. So if you tend to be a heel striker, you really feel it rolling through and propelling you forward. But if you land midfoot or forefoot, it just feels kind of hollowed out. So if you are a forefoot striker, you probably will prefer the Novablast 3, and if you're a heel striker, you probably would prefer the Saucony Endorphin Speed 3. And lastly, to note for the Saucony Endorphin Speed 3, it does still have a plate. However, I can no longer feel it. V1, like I said, I feel like is the GOAT. When I was running in that shoe, I really felt the snappiness and the energy return from it. This, I just don't feel it. Now enter the Rebel V3. The midsole for the Rebel V3 is full of juicy fuel cell foam. It is an absolute joy to run in. It does not matter where you land, whether you land in your heel, your midfoot, or your forefoot. It's just got some really juicy bounce to it. It feels awesome. Even walking, like walking through the airport, you can kind of feel it. It is a lower stack, 27.5mm, 6mm drop. It feels like a racer. It definitely has a wider base than the previous version, so it does do the daily stuff well, but can also pick up the pace. All right, now let's talk about which type of run is each shoe best at. I will say that they all do the daily miles pretty forgettably, and also I would take none of these shoes out for recovery runs, which makes a lot of sense when you think about it because they're labeled as more of the daily trainer with the capability of picking up the pace. And there's not really a whole lot of coverage that you would want to take for a recovery day anyway. Okay, for the Saucony Endorphin Speed 3, the best pace that it was at was 5K and up and even faster. Now, I'm gonna try to articulate this, but I'm not sure I'm gonna be able to do it right. But I feel like the foam all around feels really good, and it's best if it's like skipping a rock. if the ground contact time is so little, the entire energy of the shoe comes and bounces up and just like hits it really quick. So like when I was a kid and somebody would do the little drawings on the bottom of a page and then flip through and it made it look like animation, like that. It only works if it goes fast enough to where the images become clear. So like a motion picture. But if you slow it down, then the foot sinks in too much and then I get the ground contact feel and I don't feel the energy return and I feel it's not the best. I hope that made sense. It made sense in my head. For the Novablast 3, I feel like this shoe is also best at 5 and 10K paces. Ironically, because those are the paces where I am very consciously up more on my forefoot and I get the most energy return. What run is the Rebel V3 best at? I would say tempo runs all the way up to 5K work. So marathon pace, there's no plate involved in this and it's not very rigid, right? So it's not like, for me, marathon pace shoes, super shoes, they tend to like lock you in and the whole idea is set it and forget it. And so you can just go and the shoe does all the work for you. This shoe does not do the work for you. It's like more of a traditional flat racer where you're gonna have to put the work into it, but it is awesome. I took this shoe out for 5K days, even though I had 2 pairs of Takumis and 8s. It's badass. All right, so now we're gonna talk about which shoe I would not buy again if I could not buy these shoes again. And the answer is the Saucony Endorphin Speed 3. And before I tell you why, I'm gonna give these away. So it's New York City edition, men's US size 9. Comment below how you found the channel, what kind of videos you wanna see, and I'll pick someone at random and send these bad boys to you. Like, subscribe, blah, blah, blah. So why would I not buy this shoe again? I would not personally buy this shoe again because for me, it falls into like a no man's land. For like daily miles, there's just not enough there. It kind of bottoms out on me. At marathon pace, it's not really rigid enough to kind of lock me in and keep me there. For threshold, I don't feel the plate. I don't feel the snappiness like I felt from version 1. And for 5K and 10K, where the shoe is best at, it's just kind of bulky and I feel like there are better shoes out there for it. And to be honest, I know myself. I know for me, this shoe is just gonna sit there on the shelf. I'm gonna see it every day and I'm gonna reach for a different shoe because I don't really wanna run in this shoe, but I'm not gonna give it away because one day I could wanna run in it because I spent $170 on it and I wanna get my money's worth. At least maybe get it to like 200 miles. Before then I would give it away. No, I'm just gonna give it away now. I'm not gonna run in the shoe and I'd rather give it to somebody who could appreciate it a little bit more than myself. Okay, now let's get to the question on the thumbnail and why you clicked on this video. I got the idea for this video because I was traveling and I didn't want to check a bag. I was gonna be out of town for 3 days and I needed to take one shoe to do a bunch of different runs, and the shoe I picked was the New Balance Rebel V3. The main reason I picked this shoe is because it passes my blink test. The Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called Blink, and you know, what would you pick in a blink, right? Like the Pepsi Challenge, Coca-Cola. I'm gonna go out on a run. I walk into my closet. What shoe am I gonna pick? These 3 are laid out. I grabbed the Rebel V3. And it makes sense because when I looked at Strava, I mean, I had a goal to get all 3 of these shoes to 100 miles. Well, which shoe got to 100 miles first? The Rebel V3. Which shoe got to 100 miles last? The Endorphin Speed 3. The second reason why I would pick this shoe over the other 2 shoes is the versatility and the multiple use case of it. Now, there are many daily trainers that get marketed as a daily trainer that can pick up the pace or do some other type of run, but I feel like most of the time they're just really daily trainers. I mean, you can pick up the pace. It's just gonna be like, all right though. This shoe, however, I feel like is equal parts daily trainer, equal parts speed day shoe. In fairness, for levity, we'll talk about the drawbacks. The only drawbacks of this shoe is that while there is an increase in 1.5 millimeters in the heel and the forefoot from the previous version and a wider platform, I still would not take this on recovery days, and I would be hesitant to take it on long runs. For the next shoe video, it's going to be a 5-on-5 of the Puma Liberate Nitro 2, which I just ordered. Actually, I just got an email that says they're on back order, so it may not be that. For those who are new to the channel, 5-on-5 is a series I do where I give my thoughts the first 5 minutes on a run in the first 5 miles of said shoe. Thank you for watching. Awkward ending, awkward ending.